Your mother is poison, Sarah. We can't have her in our lives anymore. The voice on the phone was my son-in-law, Mark, not my daughter. The line went dead. I stood there in my kitchen, holding the receiver. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly seemed very loud. I could smell the lemon polish I'd just used on the dining room table. I placed the receiver back in its cradle. I did not slam it. I looked out the window at my bird feeder. A little blue jay was pecking at the seeds. I had filled it that morning, just like I did every morning. The world outside my window had not changed at all. My heart was beating a little too fast. I smoothed the front of my apron. I had been about to roll out the dough for Tommy's favorite cinnamon rolls. He was supposed to come over after school. I looked at the flour on the counter, the bowl of buttery dough rising under a clean dish towel. I decided I would make them anyway. The next day was Tuesday. Tuesday was my day with my grandson, Tommy. For 8 years, since he was a baby, I picked him up from school on Tuesdays. We would have a snack, do his homework, and then I'd drive him to his piano lesson. Sarah and Mark both worked late, you see. It was our special time. I baked a batch of chocolate chip cookies that morning. The whole house smelled warm and sweet. I put them on the cooling rack, just like always. I set out a tall glass of milk and a napkin next to Tommy's favorite plate, the one with the cartoon dinosaur on it. 3 o'clock came. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed. I sat in my armchair, the one with the good view of the street. The air conditioner clicked on. I watched the school bus stop at the corner. The doors opened. The other neighborhood children got off. But Tommy was not with them. I waited. Maybe Mark was picking him up today. I waited until the smell of the cookies had faded. I waited until the milk was no longer cold. Finally, I picked up the phone. "Sarah, honey, it's Mum," I said when she answered. Her voice sounded thin. "Hi, Mum. I was just wondering about Tommy. Is he all right?" There was a long pause. I could hear a television in the background. "Oh, Mark picked him up today," she said. He had a dentist appointment we forgot about." I knew there was no dentist appointment, but I just said, "Oh, all right, dear. You tell him his grandma says hello." I hung up before she could say anything else. I wrapped the cookies in foil and put them in the freezer. Wednesday night was potluck night at the church. I almost didn't go. But if I didn't show up, people would talk. They would call to check on me. I didn't want that. So I made my green bean casserole, the one with the crispy onions on top. The church basement was noisy and warm. It smelled of coffee and a dozen different dinners. I put my casserole on the long folding table next to a jello mold. Carol, my best friend, came over and gave me a hug. Her sweater felt soft against my cheek. "Helen, you made the good stuff," she said, peering into my dish. "Where's Sarah and the kids? I feel like I haven't seen them in ages." I forced a small smile. It was a smile I practiced in the mirror before I left the house. "Oh, you know how it is," I said. My voice sounded steady. I was proud of that. "Tommy has soccer practice now on Wednesdays. They're just so busy." Carol patted my arm. "Well, more for us then." We filled our plates. I sat and listened to the talk about social security adjustments and who was getting a new hip. I nodded and smiled. But the piece of casserole on my plate felt like a stone in my stomach. I was hiding my own family from my friends. It was a lonely feeling. A few days later, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from Mark. I had to put on my reading glasses to see the tiny words on the screen. The message said, "Helen, I've boxed up some of your things from our garage. Please let me know a convenient time I can drop them on your porch. We need the space." I was sitting on my back patio, drinking my iced tea. The sun was warm on my arms. A bee was buzzing around my rose bushes. The text felt like a shard of ice in the warm afternoon. Your things. Not the things you left for the kids. Not the tools you loaned me, just your things. I didn't reply right away. I took a sip of my tea. The glass was cool and smooth against my hand. He wanted to erase me. He was cleaning out the corners of their house, sweeping out any proof that I had ever been there, that I had ever helped. I thought about the down payment I gave them for that house, the weekends I spent painting the baby's room, the lawnmower I bought him for his first birthday there. They were not my things. They were gifts, but he was returning them. I texted back one word. Tomorrow. The next afternoon, a large cardboard box sat on my front porch. Mark hadn't even rung the doorbell. I saw his car pull away as I looked through the peephole. I opened the door. The air was humid. I dragged the box inside. It scraped against the wooden floor. I opened it in the living room. It smelled dusty, like the back of a garage. On top was the small blue blanket I had knitted for Tommy when he was born. Under that, a box of my old gardening gloves, a few photo albums, and at the very bottom, I saw it. A small, silver digital recorder. I had bought it years ago for my birdwatching club, to record bird calls. I'd lent it to Mark once when he had to record a college lecture, and I guess he never gave it back. I picked it up. It was cool and smooth in my palm. I pressed the little red button. A tiny light blinked on. It still worked. I held that little recorder and looked at the blanket I had made with my own hands. He called me poison, but he had just returned the one thing I might need to find the antidote. A small, quiet thought began to form in my mind. It was a terrible thought, but it was also a very clear one. I looked at that little silver recorder for a long time. It was smaller than a pack of gum. It felt light in my hand, but the idea it gave me felt heavy. I put new batteries in it. I found them in the junk drawer, next to the rubber bands and old keys. I needed a reason to get that little machine near Mark. I couldn't just show up at their house. I was poison, remember? So I went to my desk in the spare bedroom. The room still smelled a little like Sarah's perfume. I opened the file cabinet. It squeaked. I kept all my old receipts and warranties. My late husband, Frank, taught me that. Never throw out the paperwork, Helen, he'd say. I found the folder for the big riding lawnmower I bought them 3 years ago. It was a housewarming gift. Inside was the 5-year extended service plan. It was due for its free annual tune-up. I picked up the phone. I practiced my voice first, just a quiet hum. I needed to sound normal, businesslike. "Mark, it's Helen," I said when he answered. "What do you want?" His voice was flat. No emotion. "I was cleaning out my files. I have the warranty for your lawnmower. The free 5-year service plan is active. You should book the tune-up before it expires next month." There was a silence. I could hear the sound of a video game in the background, beeps and explosions. I pictured Tommy on the couch. A little pang went through my heart. "Fine," Mark said. "Mail it." The line clicked off. He didn't want to talk to me. That was just fine. I didn't mail it. An idea was starting to form, like a pattern in a quilt. I needed to know his habits. I started taking walks in the evening. My doctor was always telling me to walk more, so it wasn't a lie. I just chose my route carefully. I'd walk down Sarah's street around 6 o'clock. I wore my good sneakers and a sun hat. I never looked at the house directly. I'd look at the roses in the neighbour's yard. I'd watch a squirrel run up a tree. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw things. Mark's car was always in the driveway on Friday nights. and so was a big, muddy pickup truck. I knew it belonged to his friend, Dave. The garage door would be open. I could hear music, the clink of bottles, and the sound of their laughter carrying on the evening air. The garage was his kingdom, a place where he felt safe to talk. One evening, a neighbor waved at me from her porch. "Getting your steps in, Helen?" she called. "You know it, Martha." I smiled back. "Have to keep these old bones moving." She laughed. I walked on, my heart steady. I was just a nice old lady getting some exercise. No one saw anything else. That Friday, I put the lawnmower manual and the warranty papers in a big manila envelope. The recorder was tiny. I used a little piece of double-sided tape to stick it to the inside of the thick cardboard manual. Then I slid the manual back into the envelope. You couldn't see it or feel it. I practiced turning it on. Just a tiny slide of a button. It made no sound. The little red light was no bigger than a pinprick. I could slide the button with my thumb right before I handed it over. I called Mark in the afternoon. "It's Helen. I have those papers for you. I'm running errands nearby. I can drop them off." "I told you to mail it," he said. He sounded annoyed. "The manual is in there. It's heavy. The postage would be $5, I said calmly. I knew he was cheap. "It's no trouble. I'll just leave the envelope in your mailbox." He sighed, a long, dramatic sigh. "Fine, Helen. Whatever. The mailbox." He hung up. He thought he was in charge. He thought he was setting the rules. When I pulled up to their street, my plan changed. Mark was in the driveway, polishing his big black car. He was so proud of that car. The garage door was wide open behind him. Music was already playing inside. My hands felt a little shaky on the steering wheel, but I took a deep breath. The car smelled of the little pine tree air freshener I had hanging from the mirror. I slid the button on the recorder. The tiny red light blinked once, then went dark. It was recording. I got out of my car and walked up the driveway. I held the envelope in my hand. He saw me, and his face tightened. "The mailbox, Helen." "I know," I said, my voice soft. "But I saw you were right here. I didn't want to interrupt." I held out the envelope. "The manual is heavy. I was worried it might bend the flag on your mailbox." He wiped his hands on a rag. His eyes narrowed. He didn't want to touch anything I had touched. He finally snatched the envelope from my hand. "Could you do me a favor and just toss it on the workbench in there?" I asked, nodding toward the garage. "I don't want the papers to get damp out here." For a second, I thought he would say no, but he just wanted me gone. He turned without a word, walked 3 steps into the garage, and threw the envelope onto a cluttered metal workbench. It landed next to a can of oil. I didn't say thank you. I just turned, walked back to my car, and drove away. I didn't look in my rearview mirror. That night was the longest night of my life. I sat in my quiet house. The television was on, but I couldn't tell you what I was watching. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to fill every room. I made myself a cup of peppermint tea, but the mug felt cold in my hands. Every hour, the grandfather clock in the hall would chime. Each chime felt like a judgment. What was happening in that garage? Was Dave there? Were they talking? Or was my little recorder just listening to loud music and the clinking of tools? I thought about Sarah. I wondered what she was doing. Was she making dinner? Was she helping Tommy with his homework? Did she ever think of me? Mark's words echoed in my head. "Your mother is poison." The words had lost their sting. Now they were just a puzzle I had to solve. Carol called around 9. "Just checking in," she said. Her voice was warm, like a blanket. "You weren't at bingo tonight." "Oh, I just didn't feel up to it, Carol, I said. A little tired. Well, you get your rest, she said. Call me if you need anything. I hung up the phone. I knew I couldn't call anyone. This was a battle I had to fight by myself. I turned off all the lights and sat in my armchair in the dark, waiting for the sun to come up. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I made coffee. The gurgle of the coffee maker was the only sound in the house. I had to get that envelope back. My mind was a flurry of excuses. I forgot to include the receipt. I gave him the wrong manual. I decided on the simplest story. I called him at 8:30 before he left for work. "Mark, it's Helen," I said. My voice was crisp. "I'm so sorry to bother you. I put the wrong warranty papers in that envelope. It's for my old dishwasher. I need it back." He grunted. "You're a real piece of work, Helen." "I can be there in 10 minutes to swap them. I'll just leave the correct one in the mailbox and take the old one." "Whatever," he said. "Just don't ring the bell. Sarah's got a headache." He hung up. I drove over. The street was quiet. I put a new envelope with the real warranty papers in their mailbox. I walked up to the garage. The big door was closed, but the small side door was unlocked. I knew it always was. I turned the knob. It was dark and cool inside. It smelled of gasoline and cut grass. The envelope was right where he'd tossed it, on the workbench. I grabbed it, walked out, and closed the door softly behind me. Back in my car, my hands were shaking so hard I couldn't put the key in the ignition. I sat there for a minute, my heart thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I drove home. In my own kitchen, I poured another cup of coffee. I slit the envelope open with a butter knife. The little silver recorder slid out into my palm. It was still warm. I didn't listen to it right away. I put it on my kitchen table and just looked at it. It seemed too small to hold so much poison. I made myself toast and ate it slowly, piece by piece. Finally, I took the recorder into my little sewing room. I closed the door. I put on my headphones, the good ones I use for my audiobooks. I pressed play. At first, it was just music, loud rock music, the clink of beer bottles. Then I heard Mark's voice, clear as day. "Another one, Dave?" "Don't mind if I do," another voice answered. Dave. They talked about sports for a while, about their jobs, about the neighbor's ugly new fence. I almost turned it off. Then, Dave asked the question. "So, how's the mother-in-law situation? You get her out of your hair yet?" Mark laughed. It was not a nice sound. "Yeah. Finally got Sarah to see the light. Told her the old bat is poison, that she's trying to poison our marriage." My own words, thrown back at me. I felt a chill, even though the room was warm. "It's all about the money, man," Mark continued, his voice slick. "Her house is paid off. She's got Frank's pension, her social security. She's sitting on a gold mine. I just need Sarah isolated. Get her to see that we are her family now. When the old lady kicks it, that house, that money, it all comes to us." I clicked the stop button. My hands were perfectly steady now. The hum of the sewing machine in the corner seemed to agree with me. He had said it. He had said it all. The next day, I went to the grocery store. I needed milk and eggs. It was a normal Thursday. I was in the cereal aisle, trying to decide between Cheerios and Raisin Bran, when I heard a little voice. "Grandma?" I turned. It was Tommy. He was standing there with a small shopping cart, and behind him was Sarah. My daughter looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her smile didn't reach them. "Mum," she said. Her voice was flat. "Hi." "Hello, Sarah. Hi, sweetie," I said to Tommy. He started to run to me, but Sarah put a hand on his shoulder, holding him back. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a slap. "We're in a hurry," Sarah said, not looking at me. She looked at the boxes of cereal on the shelf. "Mark's waiting in the car." I just nodded. I didn't try to hug Tommy. I didn't ask how she was. I saw the wall between us, and I knew who had built it. She started to push her cart past me. "It's a shame," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "I didn't die. I just stopped being convenient." Sarah stopped. She turned and looked at me for a long second. There was a flicker of something in her eyes. Hurt? Confusion? Then it was gone. She shook her head and walked away, pulling Tommy with her. I stood there for a long time, holding a box of cereal. On Monday morning, I had an appointment with my lawyer, Mr. Davies. I've known him since he was a boy. He handled Frank's will. His office smelled of old books and floor wax. He had a big wooden desk. I sat in the leather chair across from him. It creaked when I sat down. I explained the situation. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just told him the facts. Then I placed a small USB drive on his polished desk. "This is a copy of a recording," I said. "I'd like you to hear it." He listened through his own headphones, his face unreadable. When he was done, he took them off and folded his hands on the desk. "Well, Helen," he said slowly, "that is quite something." "What I want to know," I said, my voice steady, "is how I can protect myself and how I can protect my grandson's future, not theirs, his." We talked for over an hour. We talked about my will. We talked about trusts. We talked about power of attorney. I left his office with a list of things to do. The sun was bright outside. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. Sarah's 40th birthday was 2 weeks away. I knew there would be a party. I was waiting for the invitation. I wondered if I would even get one. It came on a Tuesday. It wasn't a phone call. It was a text message from a number I didn't recognize. An electronic invitation with a picture of balloons. "You're invited to Sarah's 40th surprise party," it said. It was signed by some friend of hers I barely knew. My name was just one on a long list of guests. I looked at the message on the small screen. So this is what I was now. A name on a list. An obligation. They needed me there for appearances, so everyone could see what a happy, normal family they were. I sent a simple reply. I'd be delighted to come. Then I went to my hall closet. On the top shelf, there was a box of empty gift boxes I saved from Christmases past. I pulled one down. It was a small, square box, perfect for a piece of jewelry. I took the little silver recorder and placed it inside on a bed of cotton. It was the only gift my daughter truly needed. I bought a roll of beautiful wrapping paper. It was silver, with tiny white flowers. I wrapped the small box carefully on my dining room table. The paper crinkled softly. I tied a simple white ribbon around it. It looked elegant. It looked like a gift you would give your daughter on her 40th birthday. Carol came over for coffee that afternoon. She saw the little gift sitting on the sideboard. "Oh, that's pretty," she said, sipping her coffee. The steam warmed her face. "Is that for Sarah's party?" "It is," I said. I looked at the box. It held so much ugliness, but it looked so lovely. "Did you get her that pearl necklace she wanted?" Carol asked. "I know you were thinking about it." I just smiled. I got her something she needs. I didn't want to lie to my friend, but I couldn't tell her the truth. This wasn't something you talked about over coffee. It was something you just had to do. The next morning, I went to the bank. It was a Tuesday, so it wasn't crowded. The air inside was cool and smelled of clean paper. The teller's pen made a quiet scratching sound as she wrote on a slip. I had an appointment with the bank manager, a young man named Mr. Henderson. He led me into his glass office. I sat down and placed my purse in my lap. The chair was modern and a little uncomfortable. "How can I help you, Mrs. Miller?" he asked, with a bright, professional smile. "I'd like to make some changes to my accounts," I said. I pulled a folder from my purse. It had all the papers Mr. Davies had helped me prepare. "I want to remove my daughter, Sarah, as the beneficiary on my savings and investment accounts." His smile faltered. "Oh, is everything all right?" "Everything is fine," I said calmly. "I am setting up a trust for my grandson, Thomas. I want everything to go directly to him when he turns 25. Not before." He looked at the papers, then back at me. I think he saw a frail old woman who was confused. He was getting ready to be patient with me. "It's all in order," I said, meeting his eyes. "My lawyer has reviewed it. I just need you to process the paperwork." My voice was firm. The look in his eyes changed from pity to respect. 2 days before the party, my phone rang. It was Mark. "Helen?" he said. He didn't bother with hello. "About the party on Saturday. Don't make a scene." I was in my garden, trimming my rose bushes. The thorns pricked at my gloves. The air smelled sweet and earthy. "I have no intention of making a scene, Mark." "Good," he said. "Just come. Give Sarah her gift, have a piece of cake, and don't start in on her about anything. She's fragile right now. Because of you." He was telling me the rules for my own daughter's party. I snipped a dead rose from its stem. It fell silently to the grass. "Fragile," I repeated. The word sounded wrong. Sarah wasn't fragile. She was my daughter. She was strong. She had just been misled. "Yeah, fragile," he said, his voice impatient. "So just be normal. Can you do that?" "I will be perfectly normal," I said. I hung up the phone. I looked at the beautiful red rose left on the bush, perfect and strong. The day of the party was bright and sunny. I took my time getting ready. I had a long bath with lavender salts. I did my hair and put on a little bit of lipstick. I chose a simple blue dress. It was the color of my daughter's eyes. The fabric felt soft against my skin. The house was very quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. I looked at myself in the mirror. I did not see a victim. I did not see a poor old woman. I saw Helen Miller. I saw Frank's wife and Sarah's mother. I picked up the small, silver-wrapped gift from the sideboard. It was light in my hand. I put it in my purse. I took my car keys from the little dish by the door. I walked out into the sunshine. I felt completely calm. There was no hate in my heart. There was only a sad, quiet purpose. I was one of the first to arrive. The house was already filled with loud music and chatter. Balloons were tied to the mailbox. I walked up the familiar path to the front door. Mark opened it before I could ring the bell. He was wearing a new shirt. He gave me a wide, false smile. "Helen, so glad you could make it." "Hello, Mark," I said. I stepped inside. The house smelled of perfume and catered food. People I didn't know milled around the living room, holding drinks. Sarah came out of the kitchen. She looked beautiful, but her eyes were guarded when she saw me. "Mum, you came." "Of course, dear. Happy birthday." I leaned in to kiss her cheek. She was stiff. She didn't hug me back. For a moment, my heart ached. Then I remembered why I was there. "Let me take your coat," Mark said, his hand hovering near my arm, but not touching me. Gifts go on the table in the dining room. I looked at the pile of brightly wrapped packages on the table. Then I looked back at him and smiled my sweetest smile. "Oh no," I said, clutching my purse. "This one is special. I'm going to give it to her myself, when the time is right." I found a quiet armchair in the corner of the living room. From there, I could see everything. I watched Mark play the perfect host. He laughed loudly at jokes. He put his arm around Sarah's shoulders. He looked like the ideal husband. But his eyes were always moving, always checking. I saw my grandson, Tommy, peeking at me from the hallway. I gave him a small, secret wave. He started to walk toward me, a little shyly. He had a piece of chocolate cake in his hand. "Hi, Grandma," he whispered. "Hi, my sweet boy," I said softly. "Is that cake any good?" He nodded, his mouth full. Before he could say more, Mark was there. His shadow fell over us. "Tommy, come on. Mr. Henderson wants to show you a card trick." His voice was cheerful, but his hand on Tommy's shoulder was firm. He steered him away. He didn't even look at me. He was just removing a problem. I smoothed the fabric of my dress. I was not a guest. I was a piece of furniture they had to arrange the party around. Later, they brought out the big cake. It had 40 pink candles. Everyone gathered around the dining room table and sang "Happy Birthday." The sound was loud and a little off-key. Sarah stood in the middle of it all, a fixed smile on her face. She blew out the candles in one breath. Everyone clapped. Mark made a speech. He held up a glass of champagne. The light caught the bubbles. "To my beautiful wife, Sarah," he said, his voice booming. "She's the light of my life, my best friend. I don't know what I'd do without her." People said, "Aw." They smiled. Sarah looked down at her hands. She looked embarrassed. Or maybe she looked tired. I couldn't tell. Then it was time for the gifts. Mark sat next to her on the couch, like a master of ceremonies. He handed her each gift. He read the cards aloud. "This one is from Aunt Carol. Ooh, a cashmere scarf." He made a big show of everything. It wasn't about Sarah. It was about him. Sarah opened a new purse from her friends at work. She opened a gift certificate for a spa day. Mark had given her a diamond tennis bracelet. He fastened it on her wrist himself, holding her arm up for everyone to see. She thanked him quietly. Finally, the coffee table was covered in torn paper and ribbons. Only my small silver gift was left. I had kept it in my purse. Mark saw me. "Oh, look! One more! From your mom." He gave a little laugh. "Looks like you saved the smallest for last, Helen." I stood up. I walked over to my daughter. I didn't look at Mark. I looked right into Sarah's eyes. I held out the little box. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." She took it from me. Her fingers brushed mine. For a second, her hand felt warm. "Thank you, Mum." She untied the ribbon. She carefully peeled back the paper. She lifted the lid of the box. She stared inside. "What is it?" Sarah asked. She looked up at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. She held up the little silver recorder. Mark leaned over to look. "A voice recorder? What is this, 1995? He laughed again, trying to get the crowd on his side. "Did you forget to buy a real gift, Helen?" I ignored him. I spoke only to Sarah. My voice was low and clear. "It's a gift, darling. It's the truth. I think it's something you need to hear." I reached out, my hand steady. I pressed the small triangle button on the side of the device. Play. Mark's voice filled the sudden silence in the room. It was coming from the tiny speaker, tinny and strange. "Another one, Dave?" Then Dave's voice. Then the talk about sports. The guests looked at each other, confused. Mark's face started to change. His smile vanished. Then came the important part, the part I had memorized. Mark's voice from the recorder echoed in his own living room. Finally got Sarah to see the light. Told her the old bat is poison, that she's trying to poison our marriage. A woman in the crowd gasped. Sarah's hand, the one holding the recorder, began to tremble. Her face was as white as the ribbon on the floor. "It's all about the money, man," the little machine continued. "Her house is paid off. She's sitting on a gold mine. I just need Sarah isolated. When the old lady kicks it, that house, that money, it all comes to us." The recording ended. The only sound in the room was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. No one moved. No one spoke. Mark lunged for the recorder. "Give me that!" he hissed. But Sarah pulled it back, clutching it to her chest. She didn't look at him. She didn't look at the shocked faces of her friends. She looked at me. And in her eyes, I saw the wall between us crumble into dust. Mark's face was a mask of fury. "She doctored it. It's a trick. Sarah, she's trying to poison our marriage, I told you." He used that word again. Poison. But this time it had no power. It was just a weak, desperate sound in a silent room. Sarah didn't even look at him. She stared at the little silver machine in her hand as if it were a snake. Then she looked up at me. Her blue eyes were wide with a terrible, dawning understanding. I didn't say a word. I had said everything I needed to say. I picked up my purse from the armchair. I walked to the front door. The guests parted for me like the Red Sea. Their faces were a blur of shock and pity. I opened the door and stepped out into the cool night air. The party music was still faintly playing inside. I closed the door behind me, and the music stopped. The drive home was quiet. The streetlights made long, lonely stripes across the dashboard. My hands were steady on the steering wheel. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty, like a surgeon after a long, difficult operation. The sickness was cut out, but the wound was still there. When I got home, the house was dark. I turned on a single lamp in the living room. The grandfather clock ticked, measuring out the silence. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea. The warm mug felt good in my hands. I sat in my armchair and waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for. A phone call? The sound of a car in the driveway? I just knew that the next move was not mine to make. I had placed the truth in my daughter's hands. What she did with it was up to her. I thought of Tommy. My heart ached for him. He was the innocent one in all of this. Whatever happened next, I promised myself I would be there for him. I fell asleep in the chair, and the teacup grew cold on the table beside me. 2 days passed. It was the longest 48 hours of my life. I tended my garden. I went to the library. I tried to read a book, but I kept reading the same page over and over. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped. It was Carol, checking in. It was a telemarketer. It was never Sarah. I started to worry. I pictured Mark twisting the story. I pictured him convincing her I was the villain, that I had set him up. He was good at that. He had done it once before. Then, on the third morning, my doorbell rang. A soft, hesitant ring. Not a delivery person. I went to the door and looked through the peephole. It was Sarah. She was alone. She was wearing sunglasses, even though the sky was cloudy. She was holding a small overnight bag. My heart ached just looking at her. I opened the door. "Mom," she said. Her voice was a choked whisper. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, and I held the door open for my daughter to come home. She stood in my entryway and took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't say anything. She just dropped her bag and hugged me. It was a hug, filled with years of things unsaid. She sobbed into my shoulder, her body shaking. I just held her. I smoothed her hair, the way I did when she was a little girl with a scraped knee. The ticking of the clock was the only sound. My house smelled of lemon polish and old books, the same as it always had. After a long time, her sobs quieted. We sat down at the kitchen table. I made her a cup of tea, just the way she likes it, with milk and a little honey. Her hands trembled as she held the warm mug. "He didn't deny it?" she said, her voice hollow. "Not really. He just kept yelling about you, how you set him up, how you were trying to destroy us." "What did you do?" I asked gently. She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of the strong woman I had raised. "I told him to get out," she said. "I packed a bag for him and told him to go to his friend Dave's house." We sat at that table all afternoon. The story came out in pieces. She told me about the little comments Mark would make, the way he'd question every phone call I made, the way he'd subtly turn her against her own friends. He had built a cage around her, and she had never even seen the bars. "He told me you were poison," she whispered, staring into her teacup. "He said it so many times I started to believe it." "Words can be a poison, dear," I said quietly. "He was just telling you what he was doing himself." She looked up, her eyes full of tears again. "I'm so sorry, Mum. I was so blind. I pushed you away. I let him—" Her voice broke. I reached across the table and took her hand. It felt thin and cold. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said. "You were loved, and you were tricked. Now you know the truth. That's all that matters." I brought her a warm Afghan from the couch and wrapped it around her shoulders. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, finally safe. Sarah slept in her old childhood bedroom. The morning sun filtered through the thin yellow curtains she had picked out in high school. I was already in the kitchen making coffee. The smell filled the small house. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, slow and tired. She came into the kitchen wearing one of my old robes. It was too big for her. "I heard the coffee maker," she said. Her voice was scratchy. "Good morning, dear," I said, pouring her a cup. "There's toast." We sat in silence for a few minutes. The only sounds were the birds outside the window and the clink of our spoons against our mugs. Her phone buzzed on the table. She flinched. She looked at the screen, and her face tightened. "It's him," she said. She read the message aloud, her voice flat. "You're being hysterical. This is what your mother does. Come home so we can talk." She looked at me, her eyes searching for an answer. I just took a slow sip of my coffee. "You don't have to reply," I said. That was all. That afternoon, we called Mr. Davies. I sat with Sarah in the living room while she spoke to him on the phone. The Afghan was still wrapped around her shoulders. She twisted a corner of it in her fingers as she talked. "My mother is a client of yours," she began. Her voice was small. "My name is Sarah. I need to talk to someone about a divorce." I couldn't hear what Mr. Davies was saying, but I saw the tension in Sarah's shoulders begin to ease. He was a kind man, a calm man. He gave her an appointment for the next day. When she hung up, she looked exhausted. "He wants me to bring any financial papers I can find. Bank statements, tax returns. Mark always handled all of that." "We'll figure it out," I said. "One step at a time." I went to the kitchen and brought her back a glass of water. It was a small thing, but sometimes small things are all you can do. The next day, we had to get Tommy. Sarah was afraid to go to the house alone. She was worried Mark might be there. So I went with her. I drove my old, reliable sedan. He took Tommy to school this morning, she said, staring out the window. He texted me. He said he was being the responsible one. The house looked strange when we pulled up. The lawn needed mowing. A newspaper was lying on the porch. It didn't look like her home anymore. It just looked like a house. We went inside. It was quiet and smelled stale. A dirty plate was on the coffee table. We went straight to Tommy's room. Sarah packed his favorite pajamas, his teddy bear, and his school books. I gathered his toothbrush and his sneakers. We worked quickly, like thieves in our own family's home. When we picked Tommy up from school, his face lit up when he saw me in the car. "Grandma, are we having cookies?" "You bet, sweetie," I said. "We're going to have a little sleepover at my house for a while." He cheered. Sarah watched him in the rearview mirror, and I saw the first real smile I'd seen on her face in days. That evening, the three of us made my famous green bean casserole for dinner, the same one I took to the church potluck. Tommy stood on a chair and helped stir the mushroom soup. Sarah carefully layered the crispy onions on top, just like she used to do as a girl. The kitchen was warm and filled with the savory smell of dinner. "I forgot how much I liked doing this," Sarah said quietly. She wasn't looking at me. She was watching Tommy sprinkle the last of the onions. My phone rang. It was Carol. "Helen, I just wanted to see how you are. I heard there was some trouble at Sarah's party." News traveled fast in our town. "We're all right, Carol," I said, watching my daughter and grandson. "In fact, we're just fine." When I hung up, Sarah was looking at me. "People are talking, aren't they? Let them talk," I said. "We have casserole to eat." On Saturday, Sarah spread the bank statements out on my dining room table. Mark had finally left them in a box on the porch for her. She sat there for hours, a calculator in her hand, her face growing paler. "Mum, look at this," she said finally. Her voice was sharp. She pointed to a line on the credit card bill, a charge for a jewelry store from 2 weeks before her birthday. It was for a diamond bracelet. "That's the one he gave you," I said. "Yes," she said. "From our joint savings account, the one we were supposed to be using for Tommy's college fund." She traced her finger down the page. "And there are others. Cash withdrawals. Restaurants I've never been to. He was draining us." She looked up at me, her eyes clear and hard. The sadness was gone. In its place was a cold, quiet anger. "He wasn't just trying to get your money," she said. "He was already stealing mine." I just nodded. "I didn't say I told you so. I didn't have to. The numbers on the page said it all." Sarah took a deep, steadying breath. She gathered the papers into a neat pile. The rustling sound was crisp in the quiet room. She picked up her phone. "Mr. Davies, it's Sarah," she said. Her voice was different now. It was cold and clear, like ice. "I have the bank statements. My husband used our joint savings to purchase a gift for me. Can that be considered dissipation of assets?" She listened for a moment, nodding. I watched her from the doorway. She was no longer a victim. She was a woman getting her life back. When she hung up, she looked at me. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "He always told me I was bad with money," she said. "He said I was too emotional to handle the finances. It was just another way to control me." "He underestimated you," I said. "He underestimated both of us," she corrected me. She stood up and stacked the papers in a folder. Her movements were precise. She was ready for the fight. The next few weeks were a blur of legal papers and phone calls. Sarah and Tommy stayed with me. My little house, which had been so quiet, was now filled with the sound of cartoons and a little boy's laughter. It was a good sound. One afternoon, Tommy and I were in the garden. I was showing him how to repot my geraniums. The soil was dark and cool in our hands. He got dirt all over his face. "Grandma," he said, looking at a fat earthworm I'd uncovered. "Can we make cookies later? The chocolate chip kind?" "We can make whatever kind you want," I told him, wiping a smudge of dirt from his nose with my thumb. Sarah came out onto the back patio, a phone pressed to her ear. She was talking to a real estate agent about selling the house. She gave me a tired but determined look. She waved. I waved back. In the middle of all the mess, we were finding our way. We were planting new things. One evening, my doorbell rang. A hard, impatient ring. I knew who it was before I looked. Mark stood on my porch. He looked thinner, and his eyes were angry. "I need to talk to Sarah," he demanded. "No," I said simply. I didn't open the screen door. I stood there, a calm, solid wall between him and my family. "You did this," he hissed, his voice low. "You poisonous old woman. You ruined my life." I looked at him. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel anger. I just felt a little bit of pity. "No, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You had a life with a woman who loved you and a son who adored you. And you thought a pile of money was worth more. You poisoned yourself." I closed the main door. I heard him shout something else, but his words were muffled. I turned the deadbolt. The click was a satisfying sound. He never came back. 6 months later, I was helping Sarah unpack boxes in her new apartment. It was a small, sunny place above a flower shop. The whole building smelled faintly of roses. The divorce was final. She had to sell the big house, but she walked away with her half and with a fair child support agreement for Tommy. She unwrapped a framed picture of the three of us at the beach, years ago. She smiled. "I was so scared," she admitted, setting the picture on a bookshelf. "But you know what's funny? I feel lighter now. Like I've been holding my breath for 10 years, and I can finally let it out." "That's called freedom, dear," I said, handing her a box of books. "Thank you, Mum," she said, her voice soft. For everything. For not giving up on me, even when I gave up on you." "A mother never gives up," I told her. It was as simple as that. It's summer now. My garden is in full bloom. Sarah and I have Tuesdays back. She drops Tommy off after school and we make cookies, just like we used to. Sometimes she stays for dinner. We sit on my back patio and drink iced tea while Tommy chases fireflies in the yard. Carol and I joined a water aerobics class at the senior centre. The water is cool and buoyant. We laugh a lot. It feels good to move. This morning, I was sitting on my porch swing with my first cup of coffee. The air was warm and smelled of honeysuckle. The church bells were ringing in the distance. The world outside my window had not changed at all. But I had. I was no longer waiting for a phone call. I was no longer hiding a secret pain. I took a sip of my coffee. It was a good, strong brew. I watched a little blue jay land on the bird feeder I filled every morning. I felt calm. I felt free. I felt respected, most of all by myself. And that, I decided, was the best feeling of all.